Good evening. Last week, the leaders of the country's four largest parties got the question time treatment. Tonight, with our audience here in Birmingham, it's time to test the ideas of Adrian Ramsey of the Green Party of England and Wales and Nigel Farage of Reform UK. Each of our two guests will face 30 minutes of questions from our audience, who represent a mix of political sentiment, including many who are still making up their mind, and supporters of both the Greens and Reform. First up is the co-leader of the Green Party, Adrian Ramsey, and after half an hour it will be the turn of Nigel Farage, the leader of Reform UK. That's the first half of the programme. Now let's move on to our second half. I'd like you to please to welcome the leader of Reform UK, Nigel Farage. So, as I said to Adrian and Nigel, I'll just remind you that you're here to answer the questions from the audience. You know, I will not interrupt you, that's my aim, unless, obviously, you stray off the point, or, in fact, the question isn't answered. So let's start with our first question tonight, which is from Mark Corden.
Hello. I'd like to know, what is it about you and your party that attracts racists and extremists, whether you say you want them or not?
Well, I've done more. I've done more to drive the far right out of British politics than anybody else alive. I took on the BNP just over a decade ago. I said to their voters, if this is a protest vote, but you don't support their racist agenda, don't vote for them, vote for me. And we destroyed them. I've never allowed, in parties I've led, anybody who was even a member of an extremist organisation to join our parties. What happened over the last weekend was truly astonishing. A tirade of invective abuse directed at the Prime Minister. I mean, the whole thing was unbelievable. It didn't ring true. So I checked it out. It turns out the man that did this is an actor. He was contacted by the Telegraph this morning. He denied he was an actor. We then found out, yes, actually, he is an actor. He's worked in the past for Channel 4. On his own site, he says, I'm a well-spoken actor with an alter ego. I do rough talking. Let me tell you, from the minute he turned up in that office in Clacton and I saw him, he was acting from the very start. He even says on his website, hire me, I do undercover filming.
Should we just explain?
Let me finish.
No, just in case people aren't totally familiar with what you're talking about.
These are the comments, and Rishi Sunak's reacted to them today.
Sure.
This is a total and utter setup that has been leapt on, of course, by our political opponents, leapt on by most of mainstream.
All right, let me just explain it for those who might not have seen the Channel 4 report. So let me just explain. Well, I expect you have, but just in case there's anyone at home who hasn't seen it, so there's a report on Channel 4 where a man saying he was a canvasser for you said some absolutely extraordinarily racist comments. What you are saying now is that he's an actor. And that it's a setup, effectively. I can just say, Channel 4 say, we strongly stand by our journalism. Well, I have to put their point of view. They're not here to answer. We met the man, Mr. Parker, for the first time at Reform UK. Hang on, I have to put their right to reply, as I would have to put yours. We met Mr. Parker for the first time at Reform UK party headquarters, where he was a Reform Party canvasser. They say they didn't pay him, they didn't know him, and that he was filmed covertly. So if it was a setup, when you're saying it was, very clear, you've been saying that all day, who set it up? Are you saying that Channel 4 paid this guy, they're denying it, paid this guy to set you up?
Channel 4 used a production company, which of course gives them deniability. What I have no doubt about is this guy was in his alter ego. I've even found now on TikTok this guy doing sort of Alf Garnett type stuff. This was a comedy act, but it was designed to hurt us. And sadly, some people believe it. And let me promise you.
So who do you think would have done this, Nigel Farage?
I want nothing to do with people like him, and he has nothing to do with us. He's somebody who turned up, we didn't know who he was, and by sheer coincidence, he happened to get teamed up with Channel 4, who we'd worked for in the past. I'm sorry.
So in order for this theory to be right, I'm not saying it's wrong or right, I don't know.
Not a theory, I'm telling you that he lied to a Telegraph.
No, what I'm saying is, in order for what you're suggesting to be correct, someone, I'm assuming you're saying, you're being careful not to say it's Channel 4, but someone must have paid this man to basically pretend to be a racist and therefore to smear you. So that must be someone from within the media, I assume. Is that what you're saying?
It may well have been the production company, or it's the guy himself who wanted publicity to get more parts. I don't
and then
know.
contacted the media company to make sure they filmed it at the right moment?
What I know is this is a political setup of astonishing proportions.
Right. Mark, what do you think of what you're hearing since you asked the question?
Well, I mean, that's one example from today, but what about the multiple examples from throughout your career? I mean, I'm asking about everybody who said things about shooting people coming across.
No, sorry. That was what that man said yesterday. And by the way, if you doubt what I'm saying, I'm back in Birmingham on Sunday. We're holding an event. It'll be the biggest event of this election campaign. I'd love you to come along. Our star speaker, Zia Youssef, who is a practising Muslim but a proud Brit, and he's going to come along and explain to us why immigration and relations between communities and the growth of extremism are the most important things in this campaign. And one more thing. When I went into the European Parliament 5 years ago, at the head of 29 MPs, the biggest group in the whole of Europe, ironically, they were the most diverse group of politicians ever seen in the European Parliament.
Well, you've made it quite clear...
So I stand on my record.
OK, well, let's talk about your record. You've very clearly wanted to distance yourself from this man, Andrew Parker. We've all heard that.
Anyone.
OK, well, anyone. Let's talk about some of your candidates. Yeah. So I've thought long and hard about this. The kind of language that is ascribed to them, that is reported as having been said by them, is not the kind of language I would ever use. But also, we know what we're talking about, and forgive me if I offend you at home, I'm going to repeat some of it. So Leslie Lilly, candidate for Southend, East and Rochford, who said of migrants on small boats, "More scum entering the UK, I hope your family get robbed, beaten or attacked." Edward Oakenfull, your candidate for Derbyshire Dales, who says importing sub-Saharan Africans would dilute the IQ of the country. Your candidate, Robert Lomas, Barnsley North, who says... and these are difficult words to say, black people of Britain should get up off their lazy arses and stop acting like savages. I apologise to those offended by that. These are your candidates. Why are they still your candidates?
I don't know any of them, obviously, but...
But this has been widely reported. Why are you still standing by them?
Hang on a second. As you just went through with the Greens, you know, every party's had problems with the snap election. I organised a professional London vetting company. We paid them £144,000 up front to vet our candidates. They didn't do it. Now, I think this was the first of a series of the establishment not wanting us to do well, and I'm afraid I'm seeing it from the Russia hoax to what happened with this guy yesterday. And the reason is very clear.
Well, hang on, that's not the question I'm asking. The question I'm asking...
Well, I paid...
and Mark here talked about things that have been said by candidates. Now, hang on, Nigel Farage, please answer this question. This has been widely reported. These comments... Hang on. Let me finish. These comments by your candidates have been widely reported. You don't need a vetting company to fund. They're out there in the public domain, in the newspapers, online. Why are they still standing as your candidates?
I inherited a start-up party. Remember, I've been doing this...
Why are they still standing as your candidates?
Well, they're not. They've been disowned. In most cases, they've been disowned. With people like Lilly from... I mean, honestly, what he said is criminal.
So why is it your candidate?
Wrong. I have no idea why this man...
You are the leader.
I wasn't the leader.
You are now.
I inherited this. It was a start-up party. I paid a professional London vetting company to weed this out. The work wasn't done. We're a start-up, and all start-ups, whether they're business or political parties, get some wrong uns in the end.
Well, now I've pointed it out to you. Are you going to withdraw your support from these people?
I wouldn't want anything to do with them.
So, shall we take it that you have withdrawn your support from these three people?
I want nothing to do with them.
OK, let's take some more questions. Yes, the man there in the glasses.
Yeah, I mean, I know some of my friends, they have start-up companies, but none of them employ a whole slew of massive racists like you. So I credited you with more intelligence than to say it's an actor. And what I want, I'm not an actor myself, but I want to defend actors. Not all actors are racist, but, you know, probably the only actors who are racist are the actors in your party, the Reform Party.
Hang on a second. The Labour candidate, I mean, we're talking about Clacton here, the Labour candidate in Clacton has made some deeply offensive, racist remarks, so much so that Keir Starmer has banished him from the constituency and said, go to the Midlands. So you get people in all parties saying wrong things and bad things. Wherever I find it, I always drive it out. And I've done that all my career.
Well, they're still standing, but from what I understand, you're going to stop them standing for reform anyway from now on. Yes, a woman in the red and black top there.
I just want to know, when are you actually going to take responsibility of your actions and say sorry and stop making excuses?
I'm not going to apologise. I'm not going to apologise for what... And we'll find out the full truth. But I promise you, what happened over the weekend, what was on the front page of the Times today, is a set-up, a deliberate attempt to smear us. It's almost... When you look at it, what he said is almost unbelievable. A constant stream of invective. And he does this for a living. He does it professionally. And he came along in his alter ego and did it. It's wrong.
It's not a million miles from what these candidates are reportedly said.
It is
the woman with the blonde hair here.
Nigel Farage, I just have a question about being a paid actor. You also run you are online on a website called Cameo, where you'll record paid shorts of you doing roasts or pep talks for people. I was just wondering, your cheapest ones you do are £70. If I paid you £70 now, would you admit that this country would be nothing without our rich history of immigration?
Well, I tell you what. And this is what's gone wrong. Because you talk about immigration, and it ran from after the war up until the millennium at net 30 to 40,000 a year. And yes, it worked. In fact, we had the most successful immigration policies of any country in the whole of Europe. No question. Now, it is so totally out of control. Just think about this. 2.5 million people have come in the last 2 years. You wonder why you can't get a house. You wonder why your rents have gone up 25% in 4 years. You wonder why our infrastructure is struggling. You wonder why, we have to build a new house every 2 minutes just to cope with the numbers. And that's the issue. It's now running at numbers that are literally unimaginable and are diminishing the quality of life of everybody in this country. And frankly, this should be the biggest issue of this election.
OK. So many of you asked about this topic. I'm just going to go take a couple more and then I'll move on. Man in the blue and white check shirt.
I've just listened to you talk about how the establishment are against you and how everything's a conspiracy theory. Why can't you accept that it's your violent, racist rhetoric that's causing this? And it's not an establishment that's against you?
I'm sorry, that is unfair and wrong in every single way. I just talked there a moment ago about the immigration problem, which is numbers. I talked a moment ago about Zia Youssef, a practising Muslim in Britain who's the biggest donor to our party in this campaign. I talked about my previous history of really helping to close down the BNP. I don't accept, sir, what you've just said for one moment.
OK, let's just one more point. The man in the shirt just behind you, yeah.
You said within the last 2 years. My wife is a non-UK national from Nepal. She came to the UK within the last 2 years. Are you saying people like her are not welcome anymore?
What I'm saying is we cannot have limitless numbers of people coming into Britain. It is making us poorer. It is diminishing our quality of life. We need to get back to where we were, where we had a sensible policy, where people came to us from friendly countries all over the world, and it was a success. We cannot go on with net migration running at 750,000 a year, despite, by the way, the Conservatives promising in 4 consecutive manifestos to reduce net migration to tens of thousands a year. And the funny thing is that Keir Starmer, on his 6 priorities, doesn't even talk about this issue, simply doesn't seem to care. And I think people are joining up the dots that actually the overcrowded country we're living in is not working. OK, now we've got a question related to that, but before we do, I just have to say, yet again, because we are in an election period, and I have mentioned some particular constituencies, that a full list of candidates for those constituencies is available on the BBC website. Dee Williams, let's hear from you. Yeah.
Good evening, Nigel.
Hello.
Your core pledge concerning illegal migration states that migrants in small boats could be returned to France. How will you achieve this?
Well, we have something called the Royal Marines, if it comes to it. But you know what? We won't need to do that. I was the first person 4 years ago going out into the Channel, filming this, saying there was a massive problem coming down the tracks. Everybody ignored me. Everyone laughed at me. But here we are, 4,000 boats later, 128,000 people later, 91% of them men, mostly young men.
So Dee is asking very specifically, how will this be? How will you return people from boats to France?
We cannot. Well, we won't do any of this. We won't deport anyone to Rwanda. We won't solve the problem in any way at all until we leave a meddling court in Strasbourg that has gone way beyond its powers. We have to leave...
You're talking about the European Court of Human Rights.
We have to leave the European Court of Human Rights, get back our own sovereignty, declare that anyone comes via this route will not get refugee status. And if that doesn't work, we'll pick them up in the Channel and take them back. And by the way, we've given the French £500 million. They should not, under the international law of the sea, have their navy escorting boats to our 12-mile line. We did a tough negotiation with the French as well. The other parties literally have nothing to say about this because when we did try and send a plane to Rwanda, it was actually on the runway when the court intervened.
But if you're returning these small boats to France, surely it's going to be willing ports that are going to accept these small boats back. How is that going to achieve? Well, where are these willing ports?
Well, the Australians towed the boats back to Indonesia 12 years ago, and that ended the problem.
But the Australians had a deal. I think what Dee is getting at is France... you know, I'm no diplomat for France, but France is unlikely to take kindly, as you said yourself, to the idea that you come along and you get the migrants into a boat, you then go back over to France, I don't know if you've got a landing craft or something, and then you make them... No, hang on, let's just... The practicalities, I think that's what Dee's asking. And then they step out onto the sand, or onto... What happens at that moment?
Well,
do you think the French are just going to take
they've come from the sand. But here's the point.
No, but do you think... How is that going to work? No, do you think the French will just accept it?
If they know they can't stay, they won't come. And it's interesting to think, in the last year of the Labour government, they deported 47,000 people who'd come here illegally.
OK, but they won't stay if they won't come if they can't stay. Dee's asking very specifically, how will it work? So your plan...
I'm telling you,
to put them in small...
Hang
on, to put them... I'm just repeating your words, to put them in small boats and take them back to France.
No, I said...
How is that practically going to happen?
I said we leave the ECHR, we declare that no one that comes via this route gets refugee status. And by the way, we've given 500,000 people refugee status since 2016. We're very, very generous. And we deport anybody that's here illegally, as we used to, under Labour and Tory governments. No more boats will come.
But how will you get the countries to accept them?
If they do, we get the Royal Marines to take them back to the beaches from which they took off. I hope it doesn't come to that, but if it does, that's what we have to do. And very interesting that Keir Starmer echoed my words the other night in the debate. He said it's a national security emergency. Well, boy, he is right, because these are young men coming from countries plagued by terrorism, plagued by gang culture. Many of them have fought in wars, and coming from countries that don't even treat women as second-class citizens. It's a very, very serious situation.
I'm still not entirely... have we had an answer to your question, do you feel?
Not exactly, no. I've just got this vision of, like, the D-Day landings in reverse when we're sort of offloading all these poor people onto the sands of Omar Beach.
All right, OK. Well, let's hear from some more of our... Yes, the man there in striped shirt.
Nigel, if you had to flee persecution from the UK and seek asylum in a different country, how would you like to be treated?
The way that we've treated 500,000 people since 2016, and the way we did in the past with the Ugandan Asians, and the way we did a couple of times with Jews fleeing Russia or fleeing Austria or Germany. We, of all European countries, have always understood what a genuine refugee is. I promise you, the vast majority of these young men crossing the English Channel do not and never would have qualified as refugees.
Let's take one more point. I presume you're going to talk about this, the man in the black and white shirt.
A lot of the language you use about political smear campaigns and the biggest rallies is quite reminiscent to me of Trump in America. Would you say that you're like-minded characters?
No, we're incredibly different people. Incredibly different people. I happen to support him for one big reason. I think the world's in a more dangerous place than it's been at any point in the lifetimes, probably of any of us in this room. I fear what is happening in the Middle East, what is happening in Ukraine, what potentially could happen in Taiwan. I see Iran, Russia, China lining up together. I'm very fearful for where we might be. And I think peace comes through strength and not through weakness. And I think Biden has been an incredibly weak American president. That was evidenced on that debate last night. And I want someone strong, but somebody who's a peacemaker. Remember, the Abraham Accords were Arab states and Israel joining up together. That's why I support him.
Wasim Chowdhury, let's take a question from you. Whereabouts are you, Wasim? Ah, there you go.
Evening. So you claim that Brexit will help Britain prosper. Why hasn't it?
In economic terms, if you look at our exports, we've gone from the day we voted Brexit to now from being the world's 7th biggest exporter, the world's fourth biggest exporter.
Not in trade, as I'm sure you'll concede.
Well, trade,
in services,
trade and services.
In services and gold, but not in trade.
Well, trade is both. Trade is both. So
not in goods. I'm so sorry, in goods.
No. Well, in goods. Well, we've given up manufacturing things is part of the reason for that. But I want to say this. There are two massive disappointments with Brexit, and one of them is economic. 5.5 million men and women in this country running small limited companies or acting as sole traders, living under a huge, burdensome rule book, living under VAT thresholds that are too low, damaging genuine growth and prosperity in the economy. Those of us that voted Brexit, those of us that saw an 80-seat majority for Boris Johnson in 2019, the opportunity to free up those small businesses, to get rid of rules and regulations, and the Conservative government have done none of it. And that is a huge regret. It's not a failure of Brexit, it's a failure to deliver what people voted for.
Wesley, since you asked this question, if you don't mind me asking, how did you vote in the EU referendum?
I voted to leave.
And you're asking this question because you're happy with what you're seeing now or unhappy?
I'm unhappy. I understand Nigel's not the Prime Minister, but, I mean, on the ground level, for the common working man and woman, nothing's changed. Everything's expensive now. People are really struggling with the cost of living crisis. I don't think... I mean, what's needed at the moment is so vast that I don't think anyone's really put anything serious forward. And I think many working class people look to you...
to Nigel, do you?
Yeah, to Nigel to deliver on Brexit. I'm a Labour voter. But I voted for Brexit, and I thought, I thought things would possibly change, as did many people. But on the ground level, if you look at what's happening at the moment in the country, there's a lot of poverty, and there's a lot of people who are, struggling at the moment. And who cares about them? No one cares about them, because I think you have one group of people who live a certain way, a very small number of people, and then you have everybody else. And I don't think they can resonate with how the average common man and woman in this country lives, and it's all well and good to just talk about one issue, but there's a much wider issue.
And obviously, Nigel,
I totally get that, and that's why the main policy platform, domestic policy platform that we're running on in this election that will make a huge difference to that group of people you're talking about is to lift the threshold at which people start paying tax to £20,000 a year. Why? Because it means the lower paid in society will be better off, and you've talked about increasing poverty. But crucially...
Hang on, can I just... wait a minute, Nigel.
Yeah.
Can I just challenge you on that? Because I know that's something you've said before.
I have.
But you've got other people analysing your policies and saying that actually the top 10% of households would receive, under your policies, 28 pence for every pound, but the bottom 10% would only get 2 pence for every pound. So the richest households would... There'd be an increase of 4.3% for them, but only 2.3% increase for the poor. So how is it benefiting the poorest?
No. In percentage terms, those that would benefit the most are those on low pay. But here's the crucial bit.
Well, not according to some economists who are saying actually it would be much more.
Well, we don't think
percentage increase.
We don't think that staff nurses in hospital should pay 40% tax, right? People have been dragged in to higher and higher taxes.
But just to check, so you're saying my figures are wrong, are you?
In percentage terms, they're wrong, yes.
OK, so that's the IPPRs coming out.
They're wrong. The biggest percentage winners are the lowest in society in terms of income. And let me tell you, benefits. 9.2 million people of working age not working. They're not all layabouts. There are many people, I bet we all know people, on benefits who'd love to get back to work. But if they work for more than 16 hours a week, they lose their benefits. They're better off staying on benefit than going to work. They're the winners. They're the winners out of starting tax at £20,000 a year. Mums with small children and many others. And I tell you what, that would do more for the poorest in society, more than any of the other parties have even considered or discussed.
Well, at the back there, yes.
Hello, I'm a doctor in the NHS. My parents and myself were migrants to this country. You've said that the reason that there's waiting lists for the NHS, there's not enough houses, there's not enough, the cost of living's too high, is because of migrants. But since Brexit, there's been shortages of critical medications in the NHS, from what I understand, because of supply chain issues, such as IV paracetamol and other medications that help people not die. As someone that we have to thank for Brexit, what would you propose that we should do about this?
What I blame for problems in the NHS, I wasn't blaming migrants, I was blaming the population explosion, I mean, We've had a 10 million increase in the British population since 1997, a 6 million increase since 2010, when the Conservatives
there's
were
not
elected.
enough of certain types of medications
In terms of medication...
is because too many people are using them. Is that what you're saying?
The reason we have a waiting list...
No, she's asking... She's asking specifically about the difficulty. You're asking very specifically, because you mentioned paracetamol and ibuprofen.
Well, here's the point.
Just so we're clear what the question is...
And it's not just paracetamol and ibuprofen, it's medications that are critical to keep people alive.
And you're saying, in your experience, that Brexit is either wholly or partly the reason why it's harder to get those medications.
I do remember being told before the vote that we get all sorts of diseases if we voted Brexit, but here's the point. Freed from the European Medicines Agency, and thank goodness we are. And if as a doctor you believed in the vaccine rollout, of course, you'd have noticed, and there are questions about it, but you'd have noticed our vaccine rollout was way ahead of Europe. Why? We'd left the European Union.
Nigel, in fairness, you're not at all answering her question. Her question is about a shortage of medicine.
We now are free from the European Medicines Agency to run our own procurement policy, which means we can buy whatever drugs we need from anywhere in the world without having to get them registered.
It's not working.
Well, if it's not working, it's rather like, back to the earlier point, we are now free. We're in charge. We can buy drugs from anywhere in the world. If the NHS is failing to do that, that's on them, not Brexit.
Man here in the black T-shirt.
How much better off are you because of the taxes you don't have to pay through the UK leaving the European Union?
I'm not. No, the opposite. You're all poorer because the tax burden is now, for working people, is now the highest since 1948. And this is the trickery. I mentioned earlier about staff nurses. 40p tax was the top rate of tax in this country, right? From the mid-80s right through to the end of Tony Blair's time. And 1.5 million people paid that top rate of tax. Because of sleight of hand and freezing allowances, by the end of 2027, it'll be 8 million people paying that level of tax. Fascinatingly, both Labour and Conservatives agree they're going to keep the tax bands frozen. You will all be paying more tax under the next government, whether it's Labour or whether it's Conservative.
One there.
We heard from the Green Party before you, and to me they felt full of hope. Listening to you, it feels full of fear. Does that bother you, that you give an atmosphere of fear and perhaps people vote for you because they're worried about what will happen?
I want to help the poorest in society, lift them out of society, get people off benefits, which won't just help them economically, but psychologically too. I want to get a grip on the population explosion so that for the NHS and others, we can start to catch up. I want our young people, our small businesses, to be freed from regulation, to become more profitable. Actually, what I'm offering is... And look, we know Labour are going to win, right? We've known from the start Labour will win. What I'm offering is a platform to campaign on for the next 5 years. It is positive, it is optimistic, it is about building a better Britain, but recognising that right now it's broken and the two leading parties offer no solutions at all.
Man there in the black T-shirt, yeah, on the left.
Nigel, how do you plan to pay for it? Like, there's a lot of stuff in your manifesto, but how do you actually plan to pay for all this stuff? Conservative and Labour, you know, they're not offering all these things you're offering, so how do you actually plan to pay for it all?
Fair dues. By the way, I won't call it a manifesto, because I think the word association with manifesto is lie. So I'm calling it a contract.
Yeah, but just to be clear, a contract has a legal status, so the people here potentially could sue you if you don't do what you say. So you might call it a contract. I think by any definition, it isn't one.
I'm always prepared to take a risk.
It's more like a manifesto.
That's fine. Point number one, a racket that goes on between the Bank of England and the banks with their money. I'm not a big fan of the banks, as some might know. That's costing up to £35 billion a year. Point number two, the HS2 project, which is just hopelessly out of date for the modern world. I'd scrap the rest of that. We'd save £35 billion. But the big one...
So you're just going to leave all the HS2 that's already been built, that's all just going to be scrapped, all the construction...
Well, very often in life, the first cut's the best cut. We started off with HS2 with an estimated bill of £38 billion. Suddenly it looks like it could be up to £150 billion.
So money down the drain then, essentially?
Yes, but rather than putting more down the drain. But the big one is this. Both parties want to decarbonise the grid. We're told by Labour we can do up to 2030. We're told by the Conservatives we can do up to 2035. We can't. It's literally impossible. It is going to be the single most expensive thing we have ever done in the history of these islands. We can comfortably save £30 billion a year by growing up and being sensible and recognising if we want carbon-free energy, reliable, not intermittent, carbon-free energy, the only way to go is small, modular nuclear reactors.
OK,
and that's the future that I foresee.
I'm afraid I have to cut you off there, Nigel, forgive me.
Oh.
Our time is up.
No.
Thank you very much.
Just started.
Half an hour. Thank you very much, Nigel Farage. Thank you very much for our audience. That is it. Question Time will be back next Friday, not Thursday. Of course, that's polling day. On Friday, we'll be in London picking over the actual election results. Who knows where we'll be then? For now, from Birmingham, from all of us here, bye-bye.